Hello there. Welcome to Business Incorporated on Channels Television. I am BC Adebayo. Coming up, analyst perception about Africa's Eurobond, and Dangote Group signs $450 million deal with Niger State to set up integrated sugarcane plantation. Plus, Egypt's leather industry leaves behind its ancient tanning quarters for modern workshops. Well, let's begin from the stock markets in Africa, where the numbers are mixed at intraday. Well, here in Nigeria, the all-share index appears to be taking a breather from the positive trade, with the all-share index trending 0.27% lower at intraday. The South African Bourse is up 0.66%, and the Egyptian stock market is down 0.22%. The Kenyan market closed up 0.58% on Wednesday. In the meantime, the Gulf markets are largely in negative territory at intraday, with the exception of the Abu Dhabi index, which is up 0.14%. In Dubai, the index is flat at 3,624.49. Qatar's index fell 0.12% as most blue chips declined, while the Saudi index is also down 0.13%. And in Europe, stock markets are trading in narrow ranges today, with investors taking a cautious approach as the Jackson Hole summit that's been hanging over markets this week kicks off. Well, let's talk to DWTV Channels TV financial correspondent Conrad Wilson, who's at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, to tell us more about market activities. Today, it's good to see you again, Conrad. Today is the Jackson Hole Financial Stability Symposium. Has the markets in all the excitement, are there sound bites that investors and traders are looking forward to?
Well, of course, there are plenty, BC. Jackson Hole is the perfect opportunity for monetary policy makers to make sure that everyone in the world listens, as so many journalists are focused on what's going on there, and of course many market people. Of course, many people on the markets are waiting for new signals about what the monetary policy makers think in terms of their stimuli, in terms of the asset purchases by the central banks. But I think that we are also going to get a bit of a more fundamental discussion on monetary policies. Recently, many people on the markets have started to discuss why the European Central Bank, as well as the Fed, as well as the Bank of England, stick to this 2% target when they talk about price stability. The problem is that monetary policy is super generous, interest rates are super low, but consumer price inflation is not really strong, and neither are wages. They're not rising very much, which they should be according to the textbooks. But as they are not doing this, now people on the markets, some of them at least, think that the central banks should consider, not looking so very fiercely on this 2% target, but, make it more flexible. This is potentially a discussion started at Jackson Hole, because this is one of the rare occasions when really people like Janet Yellen, Draghi, and Mark Carney will get together and be able to speak more or less with one voice and define what the important topics are.
Now, will the U.S. president make good his threat to shut down the American government if the Congress failed to give him monies to build the Great Mexico Wall?
Well, I don't know, BC, whether Donald Trump is really the type to make good on anything. I rather get the impression that he talks about one thing one day and says the complete contrary the next, which is, if you want, a way of making good on things. In terms of Jackson Hole, of course, it's also interesting to consider the position of Donald Trump. He is the elephant in the room at this meeting of monetary policy makers, because what Trump says in terms of shutting down the government, tax reform, infrastructure spending, has a strong impact on what's on the minds of monetary policy makers. And let's not forget, this is likely to be the last Jackson Hole meeting for Janet Yellen as Fed chair. Her term as Fed chair ends on February 3rd, which means that during January, Donald Trump will have to decide whether he confirms her in this position or whether he perhaps makes Gary Cohn the next Fed chairman. Gary Cohn, currently the President Trump's chief economic advisor. He is said to be very ambitious to get the job. This is something that is sure going to be discussed at the meeting in Jackson Hole as well. Maybe not officially, but sure everyone on the markets is talking about it.
Now, one last thing, Conrad. What's in the economic data inbox today for the markets to chew over?
Well, a number of data from several European countries more or less confirming the general trend. We've been getting confirmation from Spain that the economic recovery there has accelerated. In France, the business climate is really strong, has risen to the highest in more than 6 years. In Britain, the GDP numbers were updated, and they confirm that consumers have put a brake on spending, and business spending, business investment has come down somewhat. Tomorrow we will get interesting data here from Germany. The GDP will be updated, and we'll get an update on business climate. The IFO index will be updated. This is probably data that will decide whether or not the German DAX ends the week with a gain or with a loss. You will be able to talk about this with my colleague Annette Weisbach. She will take over for me as I tonight am heading into a long weekend.
It's all right. Do enjoy your long weekend, Conrad. It's been great talking to you this week.